You are always my cousin Karim, and I are friends. Karim, he was the same age as me. We always were. We got along well with each other, and they would always meet each other, whether in school or outside school. When we were 12 years old, we were in the 6th grade. I was sitting with Karim on a Friday in the last days of May, and we were very excited for the beginning of the weekend. At that time, I went to Karim's house because they were not far from me. Suddenly, my mother spoke to me and said that our grandfather was in the hospital. The problem our grandfather had wasn't serious enough to threaten his life, but they needed to watch him in the hospital that night. My father, Karim's father, would stay with him and our grandmother in the hospital, and they told me that they agreed. I was a father tonight at Karim's house, and Karim's brother was 15 years old, and his name was Hani. He was responsible for us in the absence of our parents. We did not have a problem with this because he agreed with us, and he did not have the annoying big brother style that they were complaining about. Almost all of my friends, we ordered pizza, and we came back to joke like young people do in our village around 9 Noor at night. He was banging on the door, and Karim went to open it. I was excited to see who was coming at this time of night. I stood a little far away to see that there were 2 old men there, and they said that they were coming from the country to investigate complaints about low water pressure in the area. Karim asked him if his family were there, and when Karim told them that they were not at home right now, they started asking him many questions about the water pressure in the house. They wanted to go in to check on him. Hani came to them at that moment and told them politely that the water pressure was fine and that they could go and see the other houses in the neighborhood. The 2 men were a little hesitant. They were walking, but in the end they walked far away. After Hali began to close the door. After we closed the door, we looked at each other and raised our shoulders, but we did not think much about this topic. After that, we went back to continue what we were doing. We decided to go and sleep. Karim and Hani were sharing the same room. Karim and Hani agreed that I would sleep with them. Instead of sleeping on a sofa, or better alone so that we could talk a little while we slept, Hani brought me a sleeping bag from their camping equipment. When we returned to fashion, we all put on pajamas and demolished the interior. They slept in their bags, and I quickly got into my sleeping bag. After we talked for a while about random things in the other, we all slept early in the morning. I woke up because I needed to go to the bathroom, so I got up quietly and got out of the sleeping bag. I entered the bathroom while returning to the room. I heard the sound coming from the living room, which was on the other side of the house, far from the room and the bathroom. At first, I did not pay attention to this sound, and I thought that it could be Karim or Hani until I returned to the room and noticed that the 2 dragons were still in bed. I tried to act calmly in the situation, their health, and I told them that I saw that there was someone in the house. We walked calmly, and as soon as we entered the living room, we saw the men who were there the night he passed, and it was clear they were trying to rob the place. One of them started moving towards us with a knife. It looks terrifying. We thought all the way to the door of the house, and we quickly opened it and went out. Coincidentally, he had contagious shorts in him at this moment. We quickly stood up and told him about the men inside whom the policeman requested rapid support. After a few minutes, a number of officers arrived and began to enter the house. After a little searching, they arrested the men. The police discovered that they entered through the window of the laundry room. There was a broken lock, and they were targeting this specific house. Because they knew that we were children alone, and they thought that if we discovered them, it would be easier to deal with them than the adults. And in the middle of all this, when we were waiting outside and the police were searching inside, some of the neighbors came out. They were seeing what was going on and what was happening, and there were not a few among them. Children from the same school as ours, including how many in the same class as us in the 6th year. At that time, the 3 of us understood that we did not have a chance to get dressed, and put us in an awkward position. Again, we had to stand outside in front of all the people wearing our underwear, and since the situation was so embarrassing, we felt that we had a year left standing until we entered it, and when we returned. Studying on Monday, Karim and I had to endure some laughter and bullying, and we were a funny subject for weeks, until school finished and the summer devices began. In early October, I was taking a 2-week vacation from work and decided to go and live in a hut in a hilly area far from the city where the hut lived. It was a distance from the city, and its location was very isolated, and this was ideal for me because I intended to go to Akaim as well. I traveled 2 hours in Arabic until I arrived at the hut in the afternoon. The place was very quiet and there were no other huts or buildings around. It was surrounded by a large forest. I entered the whole place and ate. 1,000 began in the garden. But there was nothing special about it. The cottage had an old appearance and simple decoration, not one of the things that I might like very much, but it was a change from routine and suitable for the rule of vacation for the rest of the night, and the 3 days that followed were gone without anything interesting. I was spending time relaxing outside in the cold autumn weather most of the day, and at night I was sitting in front of the heater, but on the 5th day, I grabbed my camping gear and looked around. I wasn't sure. How many days will I stay exactly? But I was planning for 2 or 3 days at most. There were 2 roads in front of me that I knew from planning before traveling, but it was the one that was close to the hut, so I decided to choose it so that things would remain simple. I decided to walk on this road in order to get to Malgok all the way without having to ride the car or go anywhere else. I preferred to walk about 3 or 4 hours, until I found a place I liked. This was the only open place I saw other than the road itself, but I felt that camping was on the road along. It will be strange and uncomfortable. The night starts coming in, so I pitched the tent and kindled the fire. Over time, the weather became very cold and the world remained dark, so I put on a heavy sweater and a jacket and sat next to the fire for about an hour. I heated up light food and preferred to wait until I began to feel sleepy while sitting there. At the moment, my eyes caught a glimpse of someone walking inside the forest. I preferred to watch this person walking in the darkness. Without any scout or anything, he disappeared. There is no source of light in the forest other than the fire, which I am fond of, and also a light from the moon. I mean, whoever was there, the stranger certainly saw me. He was walking in the forest without light, and also not on the road. I felt very uncomfortable. So much so that I seriously thought that I would walk all this long distance and return to the hut. I knew that going out at this time of night was not completely safe, so I preferred to sit and watch the place for 1-2 hours. I look around, but there's no sign of the person I saw before. After a while, I began to feel tired, so I put out the fire, and Sabbath it went out completely. But as soon as the fire went out completely and turned into ashes, I heard the sound of footsteps coming from the north. My eyes opened to the other as I tried to see anything in the darkness, but all I could see was a small distance in front of me. The steps began to rise and approach the camp, to the point that I felt that this person was standing at the beginning of the forest in front of me, but outside my vision was impossible. But suddenly the steps took another turn. This person stayed in the darkness and stayed next to the place without entering or making any movement, indicating that he knew if he existed. The idea that someone would be in the same place as I was by chance was impossible. As soon as the steps disappeared, the searchlight came out and began to untie the tent to meet my needs, and I decided to return to the road. The issue was not the best thing, but I felt that something wrong was happening. I walked quickly. I turned the searchlight on the road, and I tried to calm my nerves. The forest was strangely calm, and this added to the sense of terror that I was feeling. I was a little worried, but eventually I got to my cabin. The world was still night, and after this long walk without sleep, I slept on a couch after it went along my brain. It was, so much so, that I stopped thinking about the person I saw in the forest. Being 4 hours walk from the place I saw it in made me feel that there was no reason to be afraid while I was sleeping. I woke up unconscious to a strange sound, something scratching the guard on the other side. For the hut. My eyes suddenly opened and I looked quickly towards the end of the room. I found the window slowly opening and a man standing in it. His eye came to me as soon as he saw me, and I stood up, but he quickly closed the window and ran and disappeared into the forest before I could catch up to do anything. I gathered my things and left the hut and went to the nearest hotel in the city next to me. Honestly, I don't know this man Mel or what he was doing there, but it is clear that he was following me and tried to enter the hut while I was sleeping. If he had succeeded, God knows what could have happened. How many days before Halloween did you take, and how many days off, Adam? After I finished my work, I was excited to stay up late and enjoy the night on my way home. I brought fast food and sat eating while I was on the couch watching Netflix. After about 1 or 2 hours of the episode, stop it or throw away the rest of the food that you didn't finish. I went into the kitchen and threw it away, but as I was looking back, I saw someone standing in the back garden of the house. He was just standing looking at the house. He doesn't do anything else to explain that the back garden is small and has pictures on it. There is no way that he entered by mistake or was crossing a shortcut to a major road. For example, she turned on the kitchen light, opened the door and said loudly, "What are you going to do?" Was I able to see his face? He was a young man who looked in his 20s, but his eyes were clear, tired, and his appearance was strange, or in a truer sense, frightening. He did not respond to me, so my voice was louder and I said, "You have to walk from here. This is my house, young man. Look at me." He walked quietly to the gate. I made sure he walked and saw him from the front window. He was walking down the street. After he walked, I stood for a while thinking about what was happening. It was a very strange situation. Why? He was standing in the back garden of the house from the beginning. He was just looking at my house for no clear reason. The topic worried me to the point that I went out to the garden and stood in the same place where he was standing. I looked at my house to see what he was looking at, but there was nothing in it. Clearly, I went back inside and tried to forget the topic. I didn't know what else to do. I put a drink for me and sat in front of the TV again and played the first episode of the program. No, the first one and the second one began, meaning once about 20 minutes, and suddenly I heard light footsteps coming from behind me in the garden. I stood up quickly and ran to the kitchen. I found the same man standing in front of the back door. He was hitting his body on the door and trying to open it violently. I grabbed the hand of the door, in case he tried to enter without the door opening, but when I saw the anger in his eyes, up close, it was a terrifying sight. I went back and took my phone and called the police while I was standing in the kitchen, and I saw the man continuing to enter to some extent suddenly stopped. He was looking at me through the open door while he was taking himself, and his eyes had a crazy look in them. After that, he walked through the garden gate, but this time I didn't walk far. Fadl was standing on one side of the house as if he had disappeared. I was constantly walking through the windows. I'm waiting for the police to come, and I hope that this man doesn't do anything else. I went back 5 minutes without any sound or movement. Until the police car arrived, I heard steps coming from the side of the door, but it was not going far. It was coming again to the door and trying to open the door again. It is clear that the man decided to try to enter again instead of running away. The police were able to catch him. He is in this situation. After a little resistance, they arrested him and took him to Arabia. When they asked the man what he was doing, it was clear that he was under the influence of a strong need, and they confirmed this after they did an analysis on him, and despite his interrogation that night, and in the days that followed when he remained conscious, he did not say any reasons for what he did. I don't know how I feel about this issue. Part of me thinks Krugel is crazy. There is no clear reason for him, so there is no need to worry, but there is another part of me that thinks about his look. And actually, he tried to break down the door instead of escaping. That means he had a reason for what he did. In any case, if he had entered the house that he was going to do with me, he could have been as terrifying as he is, whether he had a reason or not. As far as I know, the man was imprisoned for how many weeks, because he was under the influence of drugs at the time of his work. Now all that worried me was that he could come back. Again or not. What I'm telling you is that this happened last fall, which was near the end of the season and close to the beginning of winter. The place where I live is very cold and sometimes it rains in October. I've been working in food delivery for 3 years, and I was working that night. It was around 1 or noon, and there was some light snow falling. This was the first snow in about a year, so people were almost reluctant to go out. I was one of the few Arab women walking in the streets. But the orders were always working. Every time an order is finished, a new order comes to me. After I turned it in Arabic almost everywhere, until 1 in the morning, I decided to take the last order. The snow started to increase a little, and I was starting to feel tired. I went to McDonald's to answer the order they were asking for, and after that I turned on the phone and wrote the address. The house was only about 10 minutes away, but I didn't realize that the direction I was going in was the opposite direction to my house. I was about 5:20 from the house, which means that the return will be very long. I was upset with myself, but I turned and went out on the road. Snowplow cars. It wasn't yet. I went down the streets mostly because they did not expect the snow to increase like this, but my sports car usually stays well in the snow, so I was not too afraid while I was driving and walking in Arabic. I noticed that the road I was walking on was going to take me outside the main area of the city. I opened the map again. She said this is the only way and there are no other options. It was a very strange road. I did not know that there were houses in this area at all, because this road is used by people to access the highway that goes out of the city. I walked on it for a few minutes and all I saw were light poles and trees until I reached the file. It was a very small street. Branching off the main road, I slowed down and I was thinking more because the street was very narrow and the trees were piled on the sides. If the car crashed into anything or went off the road. It was going to be a rough night. As I was walking, I saw how many long passages led to distant houses whose lights were simple among the trees. I reached the passageway that I was supposed to enter, and it looked like any other normal passageway. I walked along it slowly until I reached the house. It was a medium-sized house. Its shape was old, and it was completely covered with snow. There was nothing special about it. Perhaps the only interesting thing is that it is here in the middle of the forest. I parked the car in front of the house, took the bag, and went down and walked towards the door. The snow was deeper than I expected. The boots sank, even the ends of the pants, and I was holding the door. I knocked on the door, and I was putting the bag on the ground, but suddenly the door opened quickly. I raised my eyes and saw an old man wearing a winter jacket and a face. It was very scarce. It was as if he was still out in the cold. I said to him nervously while holding the bag, "I'm sorry, but I have to walk quickly." His face changed and suddenly became broken, and then the door closed violently. I was still holding the bag and didn't understand what happened. I quickly put it on the door. I started walking towards my car as I left the house. I heard Jay's voice from behind me. I turned around quickly and discovered that he was coming from the other side of the house, possibly through a back door or something. But the voice was muffled and it was not clear, and the feeling of fear began to take over me. I walked quickly to my car. I first arrived and played Arabic. I raised my eyes and saw the man coming out of the side of the house and running quickly towards my car. He was holding something in his hand that looked like a rope. But there was something else that was not clear to me. Suddenly I felt that my heart was beating at a terrible speed, and adrenaline took over my body. I began to return in Arabic quickly, trying to move quickly without the Arabic standing in the snow. The man was very close. He was a few steps away, but before the Arabic moved from its place and began to walk faster, I returned in Arabic to the end of the corridor, and I saw the man standing in his place looking at me, until he disappeared into the darkness. Honestly, I don't know what he was doing, but the whole situation was terrifying and scary to the point that I don't even want to think about it. I still work delivering food, but I keep thinking more, and most of the time I don't knock on doors, leave the food on the floor, and walk for a long time.